Hi, everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal, and I am a draftsman and also the host of the show, A Conversation About Art. During each episode, I look for the meaning of art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today, I offer you episode 72, and I will talk with artist Lucas Bononi. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by liking and sharing this video and also by subscribing to my audiovisual channel. These are all immediate and at no additional cost to you. If you'd like to show your support with money, it's also very welcome and appreciated. You can do so by purchasing my drawings directly from my website, which is gabrielahandal.com, just one word. You can purchase crafts I make from eBay, buy prints of my drawings, or you can leave me a tip. Thank you for your time and attention in watching this episode, and do leave a comment so I know you were here. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, Lucas Bononi, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today. Welcome to A Conversation About Art. You are episode 72 of this podcast. Please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gabriela, for having me. So I am an oil painter. I primarily focus in oils, and I basically seek beauty through nature, right? So I find different parts of nature as something that really influences my art, and I explore it like plants or the human form or sort of like the marbling effect that you find in like nature's patterns or like the spirals in nature. And I end up kind of drawing inspiration from that, and all that kind of nature's instruction to me is what allows me to make my brushstrokes and like really understand what it's all about, right? Nature is, in my opinion, my best instructor.
Yes, I see. I like that a lot about nature instructing the way that you paint, what you paint, and that you're saying that you're a student of nature in a way,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I quite enjoy that because I feel like we humans in general tend to be afraid of nature, and with good reason, of course. It can be terrifying and all these terrible things, but at the same time it's also just amazing and incredible in the fact that this planet is the result of whatever inner goings happenings of nature, and then this planet happened and then we're here somehow, and so
Yeah.
that is definitely a reason for admiration in spite of any negativity that one could ever think of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to know a little bit more about your relationship with oil paints specifically. Uh, when did you start using oils, and why did you start using oils?
Yeah, so I started using oils in Pasadena Art Center in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from LA, and I was taking weekend classes over there. When I was about 15 years old, I started taking weekend classes there. Um, my first art classes were when I was literally 4 or 5 years old, but I hadn't first, experienced oils until I was really just about 15. So I just remember my first day in classes smelling the linseed oil and playing around with the materials. It was still life class, and I felt that this was it. This was my medium. The organic quality of it really resonated with me. I found that experimenting with sort of water soluble materials like acrylic or watercolor, it I guess it just felt a little bit plasticky to me,
Mm-hmm.
the acrylic. And the watercolor, I loved it too, but it felt limiting to me. really like the variation that you can explore in oils.
Okay. So, yes. Yeah, I think referring to oils as an organic thing makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, I completely agree about acrylics, plastic sort of feeling, especially
Yeah.
because if you leave it on a palette, you can like peel it off, and then it's like, like the sensation of it is like a cheap plastic kind of the dried paint is like cheap plastic.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I'm just mentioning the thing about the organic, using the term organic to describe oil paints as interesting because I guess it hadn't occurred to me, even though it does make a lot of sense, because that which gives the color to the oil paints is just like dirt and rocks, ground up and stuff. And then the oil part, we don't tend to think, or I don't know if like the general population, I guess, but I definitely don't tend to think of oil. I mean, I'm kind of changing my idea of that, of oil and fat as a natural thing necessarily, except that it totally freaking is, because it's like,
Yeah.
we might not be as much fat as we are water, but then maybe the next one down is probably fat. It's like we are made of so much fat. It's kind of crazy. Fat is vital and it's awesome. And this is unrelated, but I have been experimenting with an animal-based way of eating for a while now, and I cannot tell you how much I'm enjoying eating beef fat fried. They turn out as beef cracklings, and I was like, wow, fat is friggin' awesome. You have the bacon, you have the pork cracklings as well, and those are freaking delicious. But anyway, I'm just saying that relationship with oil, which is melted fat, it just hadn't occurred to me to kind of add that into kind of like the description of oil paints. But I want to ask you further about these oil paints, because I also like oil paints in the sense that, the things that I like about oil paints is, I guess, a similar kind of organic feeling, which is that it reminds me of like buttercream.
Yeah.
Like it has like the buttercream of not ice cream, like the frosting of cake, kind of like that, sort of. And because, that also has a lot of fat. It's made with butter and sugar. So, it does have like this greasy sort of feeling as well. But the reason for which I seldom paint, if ever, is because it takes so very long to get ready. And then it's just, then when you're done painting, you can't just be done painting. The process of being done painting also takes a really long time, because I mean, unless you're really neglectful, it's like you have to wash all of your brushes and you have to use so much soap.
Exactly.
And all this stuff. Okay, so this is long to ask you. Why do you like painting with oils in spite of all of these things?
Well, I actually am really neglectful towards my process of using oil paints. So what I do is I actually just put it inside of like a box, just like the regular box that you get in Blix. It's a painter's palette box with
the
a
one you
red.
put in the refrigerator?
Yeah, that one with the
Okay.
red lid on it.
Yeah, okay.
So I stick that in the freezer every time I'm not painting.
Okay.
And I don't wash my brushes. So between those two, I can I could take out my palette from the freezer and be painting in about 5 minutes. And then I could take it, I could take down my whole setup, I throw my brushes in the freezer with my palette, and then I could be done painting in like 5 minutes. So
Yes, I see.
I got it down to a silent science where I could be really lazy about not setting up. Like I have different setups all over my studio, so I can make sure that if I'm going to be painting on a certain painting, because I paint on about 4 or 5 paintings at the same time, I can just put my palette down and get going without having to do. I've even gotten to the point where I'll just use whatever's on my palette at the moment, so I don't have to squirt more paint.
Yes, I see. Okay.
It's like to that point. Like I'll put on way too much oil paint, and like my white will be like 3 weeks worth of white, and I'll just leave it on there forever.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it seems like those little things will definitely cut. It's like little cuts here and there of
Oh yeah.
time will end up reducing the getting ready time and the being done time to indeed 5 minutes each. So that seems, I mean, do you lose a lot of brushes?
I have them on a rotation. Every week I throw out a brush and I put one new brush into the mix.
I see.
And it allows me to have a chiseled, accurate brush in my hand at all times. And then the rest, they kind of go through their rotation. So the one that's too scraggly, it doesn't make the cut by the end of the week and gets substituted out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I want to talk more about the what you were saying about nature earlier.
Yeah.
Um, have when? All right, give me a second.
No, yeah, yeah.
I guess when did you notice, I guess, that you wanted to represent nature in your work? And when did you notice that, or how did you notice that you were rather kind of being directed by nature?
Yeah. Yeah. So it all happened it was my first and last job. So, I was working at a furniture store that was selling synthetic plants that you use to decorate,
Hate those. Uh-huh.
yeah, those that you use to decorate your place. And reed diffusers and like all sorts of different, candles, all sorts of different stuff. But mainly furniture, right? It was a furniture store. And whenever I would sweep up, I would sort of end up with a couple dried, or not dried flowers, but fake flowers,
Mm.
and fake leaves and stuff like that. And I would just shove them in my apron
Uh-huh.
because I thought that it looked really cool. And I ended up sort of hot gluing them to a
Mm.
huge canvas, and I made a huge installation piece of all of these synthetic plants and flowers.
Which
So
were all accumulated from that furniture place, John?
yeah, over the course of several months,
Oh,
I
wow.
ended
Uh-huh.
up having enough to fill up a whole canvas. And now that actually kind of reveals a new series that I'm starting right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is I'm going to be making the plants, and I started making some plants from paper mache and different
Mm.
recycled materials, and I'm gonna be doing paintings from them and also have them be installation pieces that are sort of mounted on the canvas as diptychs. So painting side by side a canvas that is full of these three-dimensional flowers that I hand sculpted, hand created. And yeah, so and that sort of fascination, it all kind of stemmed from that experience. Of course, I always loved nature. I've never lived with nature,
Mm.
so I think that maybe there's a sort of longing inside of me and probably inside of everyone, that we belong to nature,
Mm-hmm.
because I've always been living in cities my whole life. Right now I'm living in like New York City, and then I was living in Los Angeles, I was living in San Francisco, I was living all over, but always cities, right? I always felt that my art can complete that other half that's sort of missing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, walking around the city and feeling like nature is sort of recreated in a sort of way, right? Destroyed replaced with the building, and then decorated with nature. It kind of comes full circle. I kind of felt that nature kind of completes that other half that like I like to say that nature and art feed the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having my art and nature kind of feed my soul, give kind of fulfilling that craving that we all have. Because in a way it is kind of unnatural to I don't know, walk around Manhattan around all these skyscrapers and feel like an ant and
Yeah.
and it's kind of, you know, gritty and all those sorts of things where the earth is covered by asphalt and concrete and all these materials that are foreign. So I sort of really grew closer and closer to that idea of returning back to when I was making that work, and returning back now after so many years, um, so that I can kind of complete that natural sense that I have inside to create with recycled materials, but also make them myself because just like you had said, it's like, oh, fake flowers. I hate those too. So I wasn't, you know, about to Amazon a bunch of fake
Yeah,
flowers.
yeah, yeah.
But I did get really inspired at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. There's a permanent exhibition that's up that has to do with nature. And the interesting thing, they were sort of created as models. They're sculptures that are created as models to instruct students about botany, right?
Mm.
And these botanical studies that are sculptures, they look like beautiful works of art, and and that, you know, that kind of clicked in me a few years ago when I was seeing it. I was feeling like this kind of is a missing connection, like how I can incorporate this urge to want to make installations, this urge to want to sort of put like florals on the canvas again, like I did back then.
Mm-hmm.
But how can I make it my own and make it and special?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's kind of how I went full circle. And my art always goes in waves. I go through waves of really being fascinated with one subject and then another, or with one style and then another. And and back then it made more sense for me to represent that urge to create with installation, or, you know, with abstraction, because I didn't really have the foundational tools to represent something with virtuosity. I didn't know how to paint very well,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, we're always learning how to paint and draw.
Yes,
That,
absolutely.
that never ends.
Yeah.
But I finally felt like, oh, now I can go back to that and kind of research that, and, you know, and really go deep and investigate that once more, but with a better hand than I had, you know, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Um, it reminds me a lot of the way that I talk about my own work sometimes.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, no, I mean, it's very similar because, I also, I'm trying to study something. Um, and I mean, I tend to focus on the human figure and especially the portrait. And so I'm like always, it's like that's what I want to do. I want to study the portrait and just be like, oh, why does this turn into this? And the end of the turns into the whatever. Oh my God, this split chin. It's like, you know, you have it and I have it and my husband has it. And it's like, what? Um, I mean, that's, you know, that kind of stuff is just like, I don't know, I must study it again and again. So it the thing with nature also makes a lot of sense to me. And because I did grow up in kind of not rural, but sort of country-ish sort of, but it was like the first few years of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not like super nature girl. I mean, I don't go camping or anything, for example, but I think nature is awesome. And I understand that there's kind of like that desire to, I understand what you're saying about kind of wanting to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminded me of an experience that I had in Panama where because that's where I'm from. And so there are these islands, they're called San Blas, and different indigenous families like own the islands and they receive tourists and you can stay with them, and there's next to no electricity. There's like a light bulb on top of the bathroom so that you know where to go at night. But then otherwise there's no electricity. So I was in one of those for a weekend. All right. So 2 days. And when I got back home, when the sun was going down, I was like, oh my God, I have to finish because the light is going out. The light is going to go out.
Right.
So, so that is to illustrate how easily I got like in sync with the sun up and the sun down. It took 2 days.
Absolutely.
So I just think that's really cool because like we like to pretend that things are like oh my God, let me just try to remember the term. Damn it.
Like
No. We like to pretend that we're blank slates and stuff.
Oh,
and
yeah.
things are cultural constructs and shit. And it's like they're fucking not okay. It's like we are not clever enough to make any of that stuff. We're not clever enough to make cultural constructs. It's been like accumulated by millions and millions of years of us living with nature. And it's like nature, the way that we were living, nature ended up making us this way. And we are indeed, it is just so easy to and that's like my only evidence for that. It's like that experience of 2 days, that it is super easy to kind of get into some kind of rhythm with nature. It is like so easy. And I just think that's really cool and very important. And well, I wanted to say another thing, that your paintings look very big from what you have behind you. So that also is consonant with nature's kind of majestic grandiosity, because nature, if you're in a forest, it's like you're like this big in a forest. Oh, yeah. So like if you're talking about trees and you're doing the flowers, you have like a rose bush or something and it's gigantic and it's amazing and it's beautiful, so it makes a lot like again it's consonant with what you were saying about how you want to surround yourself with nature and be in nature. And so you're doing so by having her in your paintings, and they're bigger than you, they're big because nature is big.
Yeah.
I just think that's cool. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I like to be just surrounded by paintings that represent nature in some sort of way. I oftentimes will incorporate the figure somehow in the works, not always. Right now, because because of the springtime, I started developing a hobby of like growing different plants and yeah, like getting bouquets and like painting from the bouquets from life and stuff like that. But usually in the winter time around there, or in the fall, I start going down the rabbit hole of like just wanting to explore the figure, and that's it. So I really find that when it's spring, I just start working with nature for months on end from life, and just like you, I love portraiture and figure as well. And I saw your work and it's beautiful, and I particularly like the back pose that you had done. That drawing was very nice. And I feel like it is sort of all connected when we're really sort of thinking about the topography of a person and the way that we describe it. We're describing it in the same way that we would describe sort of anything else in nature. we're organic, and we have structure, but at the same time we have, flesh that's like very bulbous, wanting to like leave the structure, right? Like we're very bubbly,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is sort of, yeah, bubbly and connected to structures. And I just find that when I'm really going into it, when I'm really sort of being faithful to the volumes, I'm not really thinking of a person as a person. I'm thinking of a person in the same way that I'm thinking of nature, or of
Mm-hmm.
a still life, or, I don't really switch my mindset. In fact, sometimes I even find that if I name the anatomical landmark that I'm trying to be on top of in my painting, it almost creates a sort of symbolic image in my head that causes me to deviate
Mm.
the true nature or itness of that thing,
Yeah, yeah.
because that thing looks different on everyone. And sure, there is a sort of similarity in like skeletal structure and things like that, but really, when I just think of the thing as just being a thing, and not label it, I find that I can be more truthful to it, and kind of, be a little bit less conceptual about how it should look, rather,
Mm-hmm.
really just actually go for it.
Than what it actually looks like. Yeah, that's really interesting, and it reminds me of something that I sometimes think of as kind of a like maybe a defect or something like that of like the atelier. In
Mm,
my
yeah,
opinion, I've never studied in one, so I really don't have like the firsthand experience, but it's just like an impression that I have.
yeah,
That the way sometimes drawing the figure, for example, is taught is like these very specific steps, measuring and stuff. And a lot of the times it feels as though I have the impression that, both teachers and students fall into this trap or this hole
yeah,
of drawing what you were saying, like the symbol of the thing and not the person. Because it's like, if you're like full frontal portrait right now, and so like I'm drawing Lucas and stuff and measuring and stuff, and then I end up drawing somebody that maybe vaguely looks like you. I drew an eye, but I didn't draw Lucas's eye. You see what I'm saying? And
yeah.
I sometimes, and I mean, I love anatomy, but I think this type of stuff sometimes has that pitfall if the person kind of lets themselves be taken by, oh, I know what an eye looks like. I don't have to look at a model. And it's like you always have to look at the model. It's like
Right,
if you have a reference, you have to look at the reference because the reference knows more than you do. It's like it doesn't matter how much anatomy you know. The model, the model has all the information you need. And it's like those things like the measuring and the anatomy, those are tools, but it I think the problem is that it becomes kind of like a crutch almost for the person using them. um and I don't like it when that happens. I feel, and then I get frustrated because it's like, they have eyes like I do. It's like, why can't you see that the person you're drawing doesn't look like your model? And it's kind of annoying because it's like it's so obvious sometimes. uh,
yeah. It's the conceptual idea of the thing. Like, we're flooded with so much information at the ateliers, that then we truly feel like we can deconstruct what's in front of us and put it back together in our head.
mm,
And when we do that, when we have that conceptual idea so ingrained in ourselves, well, then we start looking less, like you
mm-hmm.
were saying. And I usually will tell painters, set yourself up for success so that you can look more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
try to do less eye travel with your setup, and less memory painting with your setup,
Yeah.
but really just stare at the model more than your actual painting, or
Yes.
than your actual drawing, so that you can really just put it down one to one. These sort of hurdles of oh, I'm gonna, try to think about the thing that's in front of me, conceptualize it, construct it in my head, and I'm gonna, draw looking down at my lap while the model is up there. That kind of thing, you're really handicapping yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Okay, so Mr. Bononi, what is art in your opinion?
Art, in my opinion, well, art is very hard to define, but like I was mentioning earlier, I really find that art in itself is a sort of self-exploration for something deep and meaningful, and something that can fulfill your soul, something that can make you feel like that inner hunger to create can be satisfied. And in my circumstance, it's satisfied with nature, with Mother Nature, right? With the figure, or with plants and flowers. Um, I find that can be satisfied with anything, right? Painters out there could be satisfied with doing cityscapes to fulfill that inner need to create. But I do find that art, it's done with a lot of passion
Mhm.
and a sort of need to really feed that passion. And it doesn't really matter who you are. Um, I mean, just last week, a plumber came to my apartment and was asking me about how to make gradations with pastels because he
Mhm.
saw that I was a painter.
Mhm.
He started asking me about how to make gradations with pastels. And I mean, this guy, stereotypically, I wouldn't have thought of him as an artist, but then
Right.
he was so transparent to me. He was like, I love to make art. How do you do this? How do you do that? I love to use pastels. And I was like, wow, I would have never guessed that this guy really loves to do it. He didn't seem the type. He didn't look the part,
Right.
but he really was into it. So it really it really should be that if you're a hobbyist or a weekender or full time, it should be that you're always an artist, and that you're feeding that inner craving, because that exploration that you're feeding is something that happened as a little kid that wanted to explore and create. And there's no need to sort of make that little kid in ourselves grow up and be mature and not explore and experiment anymore. If you slap your hand, slap the back of your wrist because you're having fun making art, that's not right.
Mhm.
So whatever path I go down in my art, I find it's intuitive, it's explorative, and I really make sure that I'm the one that's not getting in my own way from making it. Which is why this series that I'm working on now, that I just started, no matter how foreign maybe the sort of process is, I just I want to explore it because it's something that I feel is inside of me, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you say then that I want to see if I understood what you're saying.
Yeah.
So then it's art is the desire that everyone has to just make something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just create something.
Okay. And yes. Yeah, because I guess everyone has that in some capacity, even even if it isn't like, fine art.
Right. They try
Um,
to label it otherwise sometimes.
yeah.
And it's like, no, you're actually sort of saying that you're an artist if you like to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's how I see it.
Okay. And okay, why do you think we want to make stuff?
Well, I mean, humankind in general just wants to make stuff, I find. And and when we suppress that, we don't feel at ease.
Mhm.
And it could be that someone dislikes their job and wants an escape, or it could be that someone that's retired decides to go into art and be full-time artist after being a doctor for 30 years.
Mm.
But something inside of us always says that we want to be doing this on some sort of level, creating, beauty and replicating something that's in ourselves that we don't know how to put into words. Um, and so maybe that doctor that retired always felt, well, if I just hold on one more year until I retire, but really I find that we can feed that at any point of the day, even for a little bit.
Mm.
Sometimes I like to say, just like when I'm talking about setting up, right? That I try to set up as as fast as I can,
Mhm.
and cut down the time of setup and takedown. I say that to anyone out there that feels like it's too much of a hindrance to create. Like they want to, but they feel, oh, but if I need to really give myself all this time to set up and take down and oh, but what if I have this easel in the corner of my living room that, my significant other's not going to like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I find that if we can just eliminate all those excuses, we strip down to the purity of why we create. And so I try to kind of like strip down any sort of thing that will cause me to get sort of distracted. And I just close my door of my painting studio. I paint from natural light, and I have everything sort of set up to just play around and allow myself to play. If I want to be a little more loose one day or tight another day, or if I want to explore different subject matter, I don't sort of tell myself, oh, but what is my gallery gonna think?
Mhm.
Or if I have a show coming up, like a solo show or something, I'll be like, oh, but is the owner gonna like it? I really try to just tell myself, you know, just make what you want to make. And if you had a lot of fun making it, if you were passionate about making it, if you really loved what you were doing, it's going to show through, and the collector is going to want to purchase that piece. The moment you try to make other people happy with your art, you're not being true to yourself. And so then you're not being true to the collector, and the collector can sense that in the layers of paint. The
Mhm.
layers of paint convey every feeling we had when we were making that layer. So there's multiple layers of paint that are conveying fear of making the wrong brushstroke, or a sadness of destroying the thing that you liked inside of the work, or a happiness that there's this sort of euphoric feeling of like, wow, that section really turned out.
Mm.
So that's all in there. That's all in the layers, and it all has to do with capturing the essence of the thing, and people can feel that.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that as the what you're saying just now about the layers of paint, like being a record of the mood of the moment. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, yeah, and I guess also um the creative impetus is like it kind of also includes like like curiosity and imagination and ingeniousness and looking for solutions to whatever problem. Um, and that is really applicable to basically anything. um,
Right.
any, because in medicine, for example, whoever, we have bypass operations now that God knows how long it took to refine it to the way that it is now. But then that process took like all of those things, creativity, what tissue are we going to use and how are we going to cut? And it's like even thinking of the bypass, because I don't know if you know what it is, but my
Yeah.
dad had to get a bypass recently. And so like the bypass is if you have like the heart's one of the heart's arteries, and like
Mhm.
this section is like clogged with the cholesterol or whatever, then
Yeah.
you make like a little bridge of another artery that they take from like the thigh or something, a thigh artery or something, and they make like a bridge to then bypass the clogged part.
Yeah.
And so like that's really smart.
Yeah.
um yeah, and like I think based on what we're musing about here, that same, it's kind of like the same sort of flavor or the same intention, I guess, that we have when we're making an image. And it's like the same, it's like that same, as I was listening to you talk about the subject when I asked you about it, like that same creative, imaginative, curious impetus is really the reason for which we have this modern world now, you know. Um, but I guess I still wonder why it's there. Because, you know, in the days of yore of the caves and stuff, it's like why were the humans curious about like slamming these two rocks together, for example, and then a spark came out and they're like, oh my god, a spark. I don't know, so it's like what is like the why not what is the germ, because the germ is like curiosity, is like it's like the creative impetus, like the desire to do something. But it's like why was it put there? It's like the I don't know, maybe it's like the same kind of impetus for survival, because it's like why do we want to be alive generally? Of course some people don't, but I mean like the great majority of people do. It's like why? What do you think about that?
I feel that art gives purpose to humankind.
Mm.
So art is the reason why we live.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So art reflects culture and art creates culture. So without art, you don't have culture. And if you don't have culture, then you don't have meaning. And if you don't have meaning, then there's no reason to live.
Mm-hmm.
So then why do you get up in the morning and go to work if you don't have reason to live? So I find that even back in the caveman era, you still had cave paintings,
Mm-hmm.
and they were sort of expressing themselves, and the curiosity of making that first spark with fire. It's all stemming from that curiousness of exploration, and it all has to do with art. You know, that culture, even back then, from the very beginnings, was that the cavemen were making these paintings, inspiring the people around them, and that was sparking curiosity with other things that can be done, and led to more innovations. And the innovations were created because they had a sense of purpose, and the purpose was the art on the walls in the caves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that same thing that they were doing back then, we're doing right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And all I'll go gallery hopping in Manhattan, and I'll see all these people at the exhibitions. It's just flooded with people, and a lot of them like they don't know what to do at the exhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of am looking at them, just feeling like you don't really need to read the bio or the artist statement or the titles. Like what you're doing is actually what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just walking around, having a good time and seeing the art. And I see it also in museums. Um, it'll be like I'm gonna read that paragraph on the wall um for 3/4 of the time and then appreciate the art for a quarter of the time. And I think it should be flipped. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think we should skim the paragraph
Mm-hmm.
after we're done appreciating the art. Um, because it really is much more rudimentary than we think. It really is much more basic human instinct than we think to love and appreciate art. And when people say, oh, I don't really like that painting, but I guess I'm not one to say that because I'm not educated in the arts. And I'm like, no, you are one to say that.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like the painting, then that means that there's something about it that you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can research, why that painting wasn't working. Oh, maybe the three-dimensional quality of that, I don't know, of that person that was painted feels a little bit flat or maybe a little bit uneducated or
Mm-hmm.
something, and there's this sort of feeling like, I don't know if I like that one, that the viewer will say, and there you don't need an explanation for it. It's either you like it or you don't like it, because then maybe the person right next to you loves the flat qualities of that figure. um so everyone's brain is working differently in how they appreciate the art. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mr. Bononi, what is beauty in your opinion?
Beauty, well, I've studied a lot about aesthetics, and really I find that the more I study aesthetics, the more I realize just how much we don't really know about beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's the same with art. The more you study about art, the more we understand just how much we don't know about art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it is all just based on our own individual experience. It's not so much like a consensus uh, that something is beautiful or not, because maybe a whole country finds something to be similarly beautiful, and maybe a whole nother country finds something else to be similarly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a consensus in the whole world maybe generally finds something to be beautiful. But I just usually trickle it down to an individual feeling of whether or not you like something. And it is a very basic um, sort of definition, but I find that beauty can be found in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always enjoyed reading uh, there was an article by Sigmund Freud called The Uncanny, and I really found that I was able to get a lot from that because it was about how the weird and the ugly can also be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that beauty is, first of all, really skewed by cultural interest and by where you're from. Um, but anything can be beautiful. And at the moment, we're going through such a big dilemma because of social media, to really be guided into what is beautiful on a sort of universal level, right? I find that there's sort of like a poly movement with social media. It's both desensitizing and both is kind of making everyone in the world be the same person in a
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we see beauty now is really skewed through these goggles that we put on, these like social media goggles that we're putting on every day. Um, and surprisingly enough, I really find that the newest generation is getting tired of it, and they actually are putting down their phone and trying to appreciate beauty in a different way, um, and trying to go back to how people used to appreciate beauty, which was through their own opinion and their own sort of findings, and the way that we just kind of grow in our own skin, um, before was was so true to just ourselves, and now our sort of self discoveries, they're more like universal discoveries where everyone should have the same sized lips, nose, cheekbones. Everything should be sort of through this filter of looking this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I've actually done paintings of dried things, like dried botanical studies, like dried flowers and stuff like that. And I'm currently doing one right now, actually. I just love that they keep still. I love that
Mm-hmm.
flowers keep still when they're dried. And so I paint from life with natural light, and I'm sort of appreciating these like dried flowers, and um I was told that I make them more colorful than I
Mm-hmm.
actually see them. And someone told me if I had gone through a trauma, because it seems like trying to bring them back from life,
Mm-hmm.
which I was like, whoa, that's much deeper than I'm actually thinking of it. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
trying to paint something that keeps still. But but I find that a dried flower can be appreciated just as much as a living one. And yeah, I do find that beauty as a sort of individualistic experience could be a really interesting thing. Just last week, I was walking along Fifth Avenue with my wife, and I was staring at these plants in front of some like very expensive condominium,
Mm-hmm.
and the way it was decorated was really beautiful, and I was staring at it really close. I find that I start to get like I almost have like my nose up to them,
Mm-hmm.
to like a flower or something, to like really appreciate it. And I'm sort of analyzing it. I'm like that flower petal looks like it could be a painting on its own. And and my wife just said, I've never met anyone that appreciates something so simple as a flower more than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's sort of the definition of beauty, is what we really are lured into and can appreciate and love. I think that that is beauty. And if we feel sort of detoured by social media and culture, like what culture is trying to tell us beauty should be, or how we should dress, or social media telling us, or sort of laws, or what the government wants us to think, like those sorts of things that each country has its own unique struggles in facing. I feel like if we just put a lot of that aside, we can just in a more cleaner approach, like really just understand if something's beautiful or not.
Mm-hmm. what you were saying about social media kind of making everyone look the same or want to look the same makes me wonder if maybe that rather means that what we think of as a beautiful man or a beautiful woman is rather cross-cultural, which I mean, I've heard that argument before lots of times, like by an evolutionary psychologist or whatever, or no, evolutionary. There's so many that have evolution in their thing now. Like this type of people, that talk about evolution.
Yeah, like Darwinism.
Yeah.
With aesthetics.
Yeah, but I've heard it more than once now that what we sometimes call beauty standards are cross-cultural and cross-time. Because it's like, I would personally distrust anybody that thinks that the Nefertiti is ugly, for example.
Right.
And I mean, it's like, I don't know what time Egypt that's from or whatever, but it's old. Okay. It's not as old as the cave people, but it's old. But I still think it's like evidence that, and really good evidence, because it still holds up, that people think that sculpture is beautiful, and that whoever that woman must have been stunning in real life. Right. And it isn't just the Egyptians that think this; it's like everyone on Earth.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot, in the sense that, if anything, I think in that case, beauty, and I mean, not just in the form of a beautiful woman, but beauty, kind of like the feeling that it conjures in the person who views it. I just find that it's like unifying. It's like, it makes me feel unified with all other humans. Because we're different, but we're not that different. It's like we have our little individualities or whatever, but the hardware is the same. Even if like your skull is different from my skull, they're both still human skulls. You see what I'm saying? So it's like the hardware is the same. So I also like the idea of these psychological similarities, in the sense that I think, for example, also, like, babies will look at an attractive person. I mean, babies who know nothing about attractiveness or like that type of stuff, will look at what is a conventionally attractive person, will look at a picture of that person for longer. So I feel like I was saying just now, like that is unifying. I like it a lot as something that means that we are much more similar than we are different. And I think it also supports the idea that we're not inventing beauty for this era or anything. And we're not inventing a new idea for beauty for this era or anything. I think it was already there, and we're just seeing it in different things, in different ways. What do you think about that?
Well, right now I'm reading a book about reconstructive anatomy. So, like, for example, someone that gets in a car accident and they need to do facial reconstruction on that person. And it's so interesting how in that book, the different regions have like the different regions on Earth have a different sort of skull structure, right? So in different regions, you're going to have a wider skull structure, a narrower skull structure. The spacing between the eyes and the nose will be different. The sort of spacing between the ear and the nose, and so I wonder if a baby that sort of understands ethnicity in some sort of way based off of parents, or maybe how the baby has seen him or herself in the mirror. I wonder if that is sort of drawing conclusions also to beauty. Like I wonder if ethnicity has to do with it too, because you know, even it seems that it could be subjective to a baby in some sort of way. Like, oh, that person looks like a more attractive version of my parents or
Mm-hmm.
something, which is kind of silly, but I find that this sort of idea in this facial reconstruction book, I'm I just kind of thought, wow, that's so interesting how each ethnicity has the most beautiful version of that ethnicity. And the proportions are completely different from one another. The spacing is different. The shapes and sizes of the cranium or the shape and size of a mandible, everything is just so different. And each ethnicity has its best version. You know, in one ethnicity, it would be more attractive to have a wider nose because that will make it a shorter nose. In another ethnicity, it'll be a longer nose because that means it's a skinnier nose. And there's all sorts of things that are pointing us in the direction that at the end of the day, I think it's just I think we're just looking in the reflection even as a baby and just kind of saying, well, that person's like a really beautiful version of like how I want to look one day or how my parents look or something of that sort. I think I think we're always skewed. Unfortunately, I don't find that we have this sort of innate quality of saying like this person, this one person is beautiful to everyone on the planet. Like this Egyptian goddess like should be beautiful to everyone. Um I do think though that there is a lot of objectiveness, right? Because if that Egyptian goddess were to be beautiful, the most beautiful person, declared the most beautiful person in Egypt, then everyone on the planet should say, you know, wow, yeah, that person is beautiful. Um, but beautiful to that particular culture, beautiful to that particular ethnicity, and to the qualities that make that person the utmost of beauty for the definition of that particular region. So it's just kind of like this idea that I've been exploring. It's really interesting to sort of explore the human canon, and you can't throw everyone's head into a 1.618 ratio and say that it's beautiful. It, the the 1.618 ratio grid would get all skewed between person and person. It doesn't add up. Um, but you can say, wow, even though this person has a completely different skull structure than this other person, I find that there's so much beauty. And I I draw a lot of my inspiration from fashion runway shows. In fashion runway shows, those people, they look like aliens
Mm-hmm.
because they're 6'3" and they look very strange and interesting, and it's like, would I consider that person beautiful if I saw that person on the sidewalk? I'm not sure if I would, but in this fashion runway show, I can't keep my eyes off of that person because they look so interesting and
Mm-hmm.
they like represent the product in such a unique way, whereas the standard of beauty actually can't be introduced into a fashion show so properly, because if it was introduced, then everyone would look like each other and it would be a very boring runway show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe a baby would think that a fashion runway model looks kind of funky. I don't know, but at the end of the day, um, it is very sort of individualistic. the idea of beauty.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Mr. Bononi, we have broken the 1 hour mark, so I think we must leave it there.
Yeah.
The conversation for today. So, is there anything else you want to add? Well, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the project, the body of work that you're working on, or if you want to talk about anything else you have coming up that you're excited about. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, so people can find my work at lucasbononi.com or on my Instagram, Lucas Bononi Art. And I have a solo show coming up again. I don't have the dates yet, but expect the fall of this year for a solo show. Last year, my solo show was titled The Forest, and that was at Sugarlift Gallery. And this year, the title and show will be announced, and I'm very excited for it. Actually, on your podcast, it's the first time I announced what the body of work is going to be. So it's kind of like a sneak peek.
Cool.
But thank you so much, Gabriela, for having me. I'm really happy about all these topics that we covered because it's in some sort of way art and beauty, they're something that really can't be explained. And so to try to figure out how to explain it is in itself an amazing thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of fun on this conversation. So thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. I find that very flattering that you had fun and that you mentioned the tidbit about this upcoming body of work for the first time here, everyone. So thank you everyone for watching and listening. Special thanks to you, Lucas, my guest, for agreeing to talk to me and for your time. If you'd like to support Lucas, my podcast, myself, or all three, all corresponding links will be in the caption. Make sure you like this video and leave a comment so we know you were here with us. Also, remember to subscribe to my audiovisual channel and see you next time, everyone. Bye!